I'll be here for about 30 minutes or so. I'm going to talk about the Odyssey, Homer's The Odyssey. And if you have any questions, just leave a comment in the chat and I'll get to your question in the end. So, welcome again. My name is Johannes. I have a PhD in philosophy, and it's now been 25 years or so since I first read the Odyssey in ancient Greek. When I was a bit younger at school, we read it. We translated not all of it, but about, I guess, half of it or so. And for this course that I'm also going to introduce, which I'm teaching beginning in July, there's no need to know any ancient Greek, but we're going to look at some of the ancient Greek. I'm going to do this today, actually, as well. At least one line from Odysseus cunning his trick against the Cyclops Polyphemus. So we're not going to read Homer's The Odyssey as sort of a fantasy novel of sea monsters or to dusty ancient history. We want to look at it in some sense as a mirror for our time, but also consider it as foundational for our civilization. At the same time, we also should consider it as something that is indeed foreign to us, that we cannot just simply moralize about. We can't just say that he is a complicated man, because of course that implies that he's a white privileged old man, and as such he was complicated, as one more recent translation mistranslated polytropos. Andra moi enne pe musa polytropon hostmala pola plantite e peitoliestone perse. So we want to understand why Homer, let's just say Homer, refers to Odysseus as polytropos. And also really, let me begin perhaps with something else. Andra moi, this is something we'll belabor this point in the course as well, but andra moi enipe, moi. So me, to of the man to me sing muse. That's a change from the Iliad. There's no me. And that's crucial. So that's something we'll discuss at the course. Polytropon does mean of many devices, maybe of many wiles. Fagels, I think, says something like a twisted man or similar, or a man who is twisted. But Richmond Lattimore, the one the translator will focus on, that's the one we'll use, just says of many ways. And I think that's brilliant, because of many ways, it doesn't just mean that he is of many ways. He's a certain, he's just this kind of character. Polytropon also means that he undergoes certain ways and many turns, tropoi. And this undergoing of many turns, that's the issue that we want to focus on, because we have to understand that there isn't just a passive active distinction, subject object distinction. We want to understand this Greek way of thinking. And thank you so much, Harris, who just gifted, I think that's a new record, 50 memberships. Thank you so much, Harris. Good to see you again. That tells me you're of good health. And of course, Harris, I hope you can join us for this course, because you can help me with the Greek. So, and the way we will read the Odyssey is that he is, in a sense, an archetype, if you like. He's an ideal type, but he's not flawless. Yeah, doesn't make him complicated. Maybe complicated to a flat modern mind, who always wants clear-cut identities. Doesn't make him lying or anything, but he becomes really that principle of that living principle, you could say, of someone who achieves arete, virtue and excellence, and at the same time is an early example of paideia, a word that will come into use in ancient Greek much later. But we can see with Odysseus, I think, this journey from just cunning intellect to wisdom, which is what we will trace. And I'm going to present just well, here's a question I can answer immediately. So this is almost a question of taste. What do you make of Alexander of Pope's translation? Is it the greatest English translation? It's very good. I have it. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it for it's wonderful English, but maybe a bit too liberal. Liberal, they're not political. Don't get triggered. I mean, yeah, it takes so many liberties, perhaps, but which he has to, because he almost wants to write his own poem. So I'd recommend. So what we're going to use for this course is Latimore's translation. I also have Murray's translation, which is the Loeb Classics, and I have Fagel's as well. So these would come recommended, but Latimore's it's a steal. Right? I think it's like $10 right now, or $7 on Amazon, and it's just readable. It's very close to the text. I find that there's very little sort of trying to put anything in there that isn't there, etc. And as I said, Polytropos of many ways is just so elegant, so simple, and so elegant. That's art. There's nothing of many ways. It's because it's not just, oh, here's a cunning man. No, there's someone who really, really, really wants to, has to, because he's necessitated to do certain things. And this is something we often forget. It's not just willful decision. There is sort of necessity that drives everything for the ancient Greeks. Fate. So let me begin actually on fate and how we then also might see ourselves reflected. Well, thank you, Harris. In the Odyssey, so his journey back home really begins when he finally gets to leave Calypso's island. Just to briefly summarize this, briefly, so I shouldn't split my infinitives. He's offered immortality by her. Not just immortality. I mean, that's probably the most you can offer anyone, but any mortal. He's offered any sort of comfort you can imagine. Now, if you think of ourselves, pampered and comforted as we are today, we could almost see ourselves dreaming of Calypso's island, consumer's paradise. And however, would that imply Odysseus is not just unhappy, he's almost dead inside, you could say. Because he has no destiny. He knows that he's abandoning his fate if he were to remain on Calypso's island. And his fate is what? To return home, to be a mortal, to die, and to rebuild his oikos, his household. Because from the oikos, the cosmos is also reinstated, and hence the nomos, between cosmos and oikos, between heaven and earth, if you like, in a non-Christian sense, of course, is reinstated after dreadful war. And so these are sort of the themes we're going to discuss. So the first week, it'll be 5 weeks. I'll mention a few things on the course later on. If you have a question, just let me know in the chat, and I'll get to your question. In the end, I'll reserve a couple of minutes for that for later on. So let's perhaps move to a bit of just one Greek line here, which is in book 9. So Odysseus and his men are on Polyphemus. That's the Cyclops island, and he uses his cunning. I have to find the line that I want to read out to you. One second. Well, he calls himself, I can say this now before I find the line. He calls himself, importantly, when the Polyphemus asks him, "What's your name?" he calls himself Utis, nobody. And when you listen closely, though, Utis Odysseus sounds at least similar. So he's not, he's sort of, you could say he's lying a little bit. But he could also just play with his own name. At the same time, you could even go, more existential. You could say it's self-denial, it's denial of ego for the sake, because ultimately, in that society back then, it a lot was about fame, immortal fame, and geared towards endless competition, and so. But here we find someone who, at least for the sake of survival, is able to deny himself. So his pride, he actually swallows his pride here. Good old Odysseus. And so we should understand this as really a moment that is, I think, has existential depth, which is what we're going to discuss in further detail, but also as someone who is really able to swallow his pride in a moment where it's necessary, because he could have just pridefully said, which he will do later on, he could have just pridefully said, I am Odysseus, hero of Troy. Here we have it. Utis emoi genonoma. So this is line 366 in book 9 of the Odyssey. So that's simple enough. My name is Utis, nobody or no man. Utinde me kykles kisui meter ed pater et aloi pantes hetairoi. No one call me my father, my mother, my father, and all my other fellows or comrades, all the others that I know. So this is Odysseus speaking, this is Odysseus lying, if you like, to Polyphemus. And so what happens, we find in line 408, utis me ktene dolo ude bie psin. I mean, there are Greeks in the audience, so I do apologize for my pronunciation, but that's just how I was taught to pronounce this, and it hasn't changed since, because we just pronounced this very German. And so, he says, my friends, nobody is slaying me. Nobody is slaying me. Yeah. And of course, that is the trick, and how they can leave. And the rest we'll discuss in the course. But what we find here is really a sort of denial of ego, swallowing of pride, metis over hubris, so his cunning over his hubris, which of course then will come back to haunt him. He does want to ultimately be known as the one who did at least blind Polyphemus, if not slay him outright. So he must show, in a sense, if you want to speak in a more modern sense, that he overcomes his desire, almost not quite desire, but his need for validation and kleos, fame. And however, of course, in the end, he almost messes it up again. So we do see here Odysseus on his journey towards a higher understanding, perhaps, or wisdom, as we shall see towards the end of the Odyssey. Again, if you have questions, please put them in the chat. Now leave them there, and I'll get to them in the end. I want to give you a bit of a feel of what a seminar might be like, compressing several lectures into one live stream here. So what will happen is I will lecture for about 15 minutes, 20 minutes per hour. So there's 2 hours in total per session. After that, we'll have a group discussion, followed again by another brief lecture. by yours truly. And from then on, we go through the entire text. So we were going to try and read all 24 books, but there will be focused reading sections, of course. So if you're a little bit pressed for time, so on average, it's about 70 pages per week. That's doable. If you want to read less, that's fine too. I'll just show you what this looks like, perhaps on the inside, just briefly. So for the first section of the first session, we'll focus on, in book 1, the Proemium and the Council of the Gods. So you can see here the lines, especially that you should focus on for the reading of the first session, just in book 1. There's more reading set out for book 2, 3, and 4, but I'll just show you this one here. Now, I also copied in here the first 2 lines in ancient Greek, again, just so you can see it. And then there are questions that you don't have to answer, but that should guide you in your reading. So what does polytropos mean, and why does this matter? And it's very important, because something that really bothered me when I saw the poster, I suppose, for the new Nolan flick on supposedly the Odyssey, was the subtitle Defy the Gods. And right from the beginning, you will learn that Odysseus is a darling of the goddess Athena, for example. And he is truly an instrument of divine justice. Yes, there's Poseidon also, I'm aware. But it is utterly not about defy the gods. And I actually understand this as, let's just say, the god of Hollywood wanting to defy, calling for the defiance of these gods. So we should be worried about that, perhaps. I'll show you the enrollment link and everything else in a second as well. So again, if there are questions, follow the link. Put them in the chat, and then, by the way, you can also enroll if you want already. So I think half of the seminar spots have already been taken. So in book 10, another famous passage, of course, or moment occurs early on in book 9. We also find the Lotus Eaters, but in book 10, and I also want to look at book 11, where Odysseus is in, well, he's not quite in Hades, but he meets the dead, amongst them Achilles, and Achilles says something really striking, which we should look at. In book 10, Odysseus finds himself on Circe's island, and again, speaking in a more perhaps modern fashion, we could say that they're drugged by a potion, and they become, I'll just speak metaphorically, they become like pigs, they become swines, yes. But importantly, because they are stripped of their memory, of their human memory. Memory is a very important theme also in the Odyssey, as we shall see and as we shall explore. But Hermes, as ever, comes to the rescue and gives him moly, which allows him to become entirely immune to the magic of Circe. And so while there's no killing of the men of Odysseus, it's almost worse than killing them. It's almost worse than murdering them, because she takes away from them their being human. Again, their memory is taken from them. They forget who they are. They forget who they are supposed to be and who they still are supposed to become. And they become animal-like. And in some sense, if you want to be very playful, you could say that they're given instant gratification and a sort of a doom loop, positive feedback loop of instant gratification, as we might often find ourselves in as well. And so, almost worse than death, you could say. I guess it is worse than death. And in some sense, you could think of Molly, of this potion that saves Odysseus or protects him, as a philosophical moment in the entire Odyssey, in which Odysseus shows that he's of, let's say, of higher reason, itself not easily obtained. You're not just granted rationality and just by birth. You have to uproot it from the earth. You have to, well, not uproot it, but you have to find it, and you have to make it your own. You have to live up to it, to put it simply. So this is one of those painful moments along the entire journey in which Odysseus becomes more and more Odysseus. He is on his path to wisdom, truly. And that is the path that we follow him along with. Because he retains memory, he cherishes human memory, and does not allow himself to be debased to mere animalistic impulses or base desires and drives. And if you think of our time, again, let's not forget you are watching this on YouTube. And I can see people jumping in and out of the live stream, which is indicative of either, of course, a rather boring presentation on my part, but perhaps also of sort of from one thing to the next, from one video to the next, scrolling, etc. There is a bad infinity to the endless scrolling, the digital distraction that we are surrounded with. And in some sense, we are digitally demented. We are in digital amnesia, which is also why I'd like to invite you to take this course, because it will force you, in a good way, to focus on one text for 5 weeks in a group. And together with that group, you will read the text under some guidance from me. But what's more important is that you focus on the text, you allow the text to speak to you, and you allow yourself to be focused for that time and not scattered, as we all are so often. So don't be a passive consumer. Well, thank you, sir or madam. Not boring at all. Thank you. I should like to point out once more, if you have a question, either just on the technicalities of this course or any course, please let me know in the chat. And if you have a question on the Odyssey, please also let me know. I'd be keen to answer your question if I can. If I'm able to, I might not be. And I'll just point this out again. It's been about 25 years now that I first read it in ancient Greece. It's always stayed with me. So what you do is when you're 16, you've had about a year or so of ancient Greek, or 1.5 to 2 years, you can already read the Odyssey with help. With obviously you need a dictionary and everything. And then later on, if you stay on with Greek, I did Leistungskurs. You would say probably I majored in ancient Greek for my Matura, for my Abitur, which is the diploma that you get after. So I think the British would say A levels. There's no equivalent to my knowledge in America. I'm not sure. And so that's when we read the Iliad. So it's perfectly normal, if you're wondering, by the way, to read the Odyssey before the Iliad. It's a more accessible text. Odysseus is a more accessible hero because he is, in some sense, closer to us than Achilles. He is quite different from this. So Achilles, even though he's tasked with becoming both a man of words and of a man of deeds, a doer of deeds, and a speaker of words. He, of course, which in some sense he does. So that's his phoenix or phoenix. His teacher says that to him. But perhaps Odysseus continues this to an extent that we can relate to better. By the way, there's another way in which you could just, by association, perhaps connect Achilles and Odysseus. The first word of the Iliad is minen, so that means anger or rage. So sing of the rage of Achilles, and Odysseus is the one who is hated. That's what his name means, or the one who's angry, depending who you ask. So but he is on his journey to be a mortal, a regular mortal. And Plato will continue this story, by the way, in the myth of in book 10 of the Politeia, the so-called Republic, in which Odysseus says to him, yes, if I shall be born again, in which Plato lets Odysseus say, that he wants to be born again, if at all, as just a regular man without any claim to fame. Of course, he can say this only after he's gone through his ordeal, so we shouldn't forget that. So it's speaking about rebirth, not first birth, perhaps. So there's a need to go through all of this. And we want to explore as well what that need is, because it is really a fundamental, if not the fundamental, myth of European humanity. You could connect this to perhaps the only film adaptation that should concern us, which is Stanley Kubrick's 2001: A Space Odyssey, even though, of course, in this one we find also a few other elements that are not in Homer, elements that are more likely found in the Bible. But in that sense, of course, Kubrick's work here is rather remarkable because it does bring together that deity of the Old Testament with Odysseus, doesn't he? Well, there's a pessimistic idealist. Good afternoon, Dr. Niederhauser. Your work is much appreciated. Well, thank you so much. I hope you are a strong pessimist, as Nietzsche demands, and not a weak pessimist, as Schopenhauer may have been. I might actually teach a course on Schopenhauer next year, finally. I'm very much looking forward to that one. But that is next year, very much towards the end of next year. This year, it's Homer's The Odyssey, a course I will teach once, and then maybe next year the Iliad. So in preparation for next year, you should take this course this year. And yeah. And then let's see what happens in the fall. See what the muses tell me. The muses might sing to me. But you see, that's a remarkable shift. Sing of the man, or sing of rage. Tell the rage of Achilles. But in here, andra moi enipe. Say or tell me. So the rhapsode is already, we might say, perhaps more conscious. Love from Belfast, yeah. Well, good luck. And love to you, my Northern Irish friend. I have great appreciation for the Irish. A strong people. So I'd like to look at in book 11. I'll actually read something from Latimore's translation, which touched me so deeply when I read it. So Odysseus travels to the land of the dead, and he meets his friend Elpenor, for example. So he doesn't go down into Hades, but they sacrifice some blood or drop some blood, and then the ghosts reappear. And I want to read what Achilles has to say, but also here just so it took the sheep and cut their throats. Sorry, I have to find it. Oh yes, this is. I took the sheep and cut their throats over the pit, and the dark, clouding blood ran in, and the souls of the perished dead gathered to the place up out of Erebos, brides and young, unmarried men, and long-suffering elders, virgins tender, and with the sorrows of young hearts upon them, and many fighting men killed in battle, stabbed with brazen spears, still carrying their bloody armor upon them. These came swarming around my pit from every direction with inhuman clamor, and green fear took hold of me. Yes, this is what I wanted to read out to you, which I think you can hear why. I just think that Latimore's is so elegant. It's eloquent, elegant. And without much, without trying to bring any presentism, let's just say, into the text, right? The critical historian who has to problematize everything. Polymetes, by the way, does not mean lying, as this. I forget her name. Whatever she wrote, she says lying Odysseus said towards the end of the Odyssey. That's not what that says. Polymetes means the man of many wiles, but also just really the man of many devices, the man who's very talented, we could say, perhaps even. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, so this is now book 11. We are witnessing the encounter between Achilles and Odysseus. Yes, it is an elegant, haunting passage. And it is so because of the wonderful translation by Latimore, which again we shall use as the course, which you're more than welcome to join. Perhaps I should just do this now, and why not? The link to enroll is this one here. About half for the seminars, half of the spots have been taken, and I'll run this course once this summer, and then it closes for enrollment on July the 8th. So Proton Eidula Kamonton. Proton Eidula Kamonton. And I'm looking, so this is what this is the final sentence from so Achilles asks him a question, how did you come down here? Achilles asks Odysseus, how did you come down here where we dwell? We dead people. Proton Eidula Kamonton. This eidolon is what interests me here. The word eidolon is used by Plato and of course has a whole other dimension for Plato, but I think it begins here. We might say it's phantoms of the man, or shadows, mere shadows of the mortals. So eidolon is shadow, we could say, or shadow image or phantom, and proton is mortals, and kamonton, we could say the point is outworn or just old, vanished, etc. And that's what we will belabor this point here in the actual seminar. Because there's a notion of eidos, which is then translated as form or as idea, is that which is visible. And here, the dead are visible, but only as eidolon, as mere phantoms visible. So they can't be touched, and it's explained why that is, etc. as well here. But we can see here almost like and Plato will use eidolon in the Republic, in the Politeia, to describe a moment in which an eidos is not fully born or can only become a shadow of itself, and hence generate, as we might say, a sort of simulacrum. Of course, here, this wouldn't be a simulacrum because it is the phantom of Achilles. So this is one of the directions that our discussion then could take us, one of the many directions that it might take us. So what will happen during the seminar where we discuss this particular book, which is book 11, you want to read up on this yourself. Odysseus also meets Agamemnon, Heracles, he sees Heracles, he sees Sisyphus, he sees Tartarus, and not Tartarus, Tantalus. Sorry, I got confused. He sees Tantalus and sees them suffering in Hades, and so we want to understand why Achilles announces himself as an eidolon. What the philosophical dimension of this is. Clearly, we are here long before Plato, etc. So, but that's what we want to get to. Some of these passages. So I'll pick them out specifically for you to read and focus on, and then we'll have the lecture sort of build up to a discussion on a passage such as this one, while of course the discussion is perfectly free as always to take us just about anywhere we like, or rather where you would like to go. And what will also happen during the it's one of my editions during the seminars is that you are more than welcome to present your own brief talk every week. So if you'd like to present something right in the first week for 5 minutes on the Athena's relationship with Odysseus as she presents it herself to her father, Zeus, beginning around line 25 or so, then you're welcome to do so. Or on the meaning of oikos, of household, and the lost son, Telemachus, the fatherless son, and what the destruction of the household might mean. Also very important, of course, the utter disrespect for xenia, for hospitality, that the suitors have as they squat in Penelope's house. Penelope's own cunning, of course, is important. It's important to consider why she refers to her husband as lion-hearted. We do want to get to know Penelope as well. We won't just focus on the adventures. So I just pick them out because perhaps this is something that people are more familiar with. But so we'll be spending 2 weekends on the adventures and 3 on the rest of the book. So there'll be plenty of time to discuss everything. And as everything is recorded, you can always come back to it. And as we meet for 5 consecutive weeks, which gives us a lot of time to just reference everything again and make sure that we see the work as a whole and understand why it is so fundamental. Yeah, it's not just part of the Western canon because someone said so. It already points to paideia. to that full, well-rounded individual, let's say. Paideia is the Greek word for culture, if you like, which is their inheritance. This is what they've given us. They've given us everything, which is why we must read these texts and cherish them, because without them, we are like Circe's victims. We are swine-like animals, reduced, lost in our memory, without memory, animal-like. That is the issue. You have a distinct responsibility. It's not just the fact that you were born into some place. You have to do the work as well. And reading this text is part of that work. So, let me know if there are questions. You're all in listening mode, I suppose. But if you have questions, please do ask them now. And I'm looking at my notes. So I'm going to show you the enrollment page now and how this all works, etc., etc., etc. So I'll just mention this now, or else people will get confused. We begin July the 11th. That's a Saturday at 4 p.m. Central European time. If you're in America, that's 10 a.m. Eastern time and 7 a.m. PST. So if you're in America, you've got the whole weekend ahead of you. If you're in Europe, you can spend a leisurely afternoon with us for 5 consecutive weeks. And I think even someone who's brave enough in Australia might be able to join us at midnight or so, or maybe in Japan or wherever you are. So if you can make it, wonderful. We've had people join in from India before, who stayed up much later because we used to do this later. So this is the first time we do it in the afternoon, at least afternoon for my time. And someone who has an avatar of my favorite video game of all time is Deus Ex, the only video game worth playing, says Homer's works do indeed give meaning to life. They do. So I'll teach this once. Enrollment will close on July the 8th, 3 days before. That includes the self-study tier. And so I'd like to invite you to join this course and rigorously read and interrogate the Odyssey with me. We'll read it line by line, and it'll be, as always, a wonderful cohort and group that we'll find here. I already, as I said, about 10 people have already enrolled, so half the places are taken. There are also, if you allow me to point this out, there are private additional private tutorials as well if you scroll down a bit. So this is the enrollment page. Again, there's a link, a pinned comment, I think, to it, and I'll just share it here again. I do want at least one question, kids. Go on. If you have practical questions on the course, that's fine too. Also, if you watch this later on, just leave a comment and I'll try and get back to you. I don't always see all comments for some reason on YouTube. Sometimes they evaporate again for some reason. I have no idea why that happens. So I would say, and I'll just answer some of the questions that we always get as well in a second. So the FAQ, if you like. So let's look at this page here. So you find, if you head over to this page now, you find here Odysseus with Athena. He is her darling, not defying her at all. She gives him thoughts. She gives him an inkling. Here is Polyphemus, that raw materiality, of that just raw quantity almost. You can look at him like as an allegory for that as well. And here is I. Here are the sirens. Something else we'll discuss, of course, as well, the sirens and their calls. You'll find a sort of an overview of the course and what, subject to change if I think something else would be important. But nostos, homecoming, where we get the word nostalgia from, for example. Um, Xenia, hospitality, being a good guest, being a good host, absolutely fundamental. So we want to understand this as really the basis of culture, of paideia in this highest sense. So you find basically all details here, and then also a detailed course curriculum and schedule. Every session lasts 2 hours. I will admit, though, that they will probably be a bit longer. Does that mean you have to stay the full 2 hours? No. If you, let's say you call in from San Francisco at 7 a.m. and you've got something else at 8:30, you leave after 1.5 hours, that's fine. And all sessions are recorded, so you can always come back to them. You can't make one of the sessions. That's okay, because it's recorded and uploaded the next day to Teachable. There's also a dedicated Discord server for everyone who signs up, which is already open, so you can start the discussion. Some people have already started to post in there, in there, and so you find here what we're going to read. Again, it's about 70 pages per week. That's very doable, especially when you sign up now. You get the copy of the book, you sign up now, you start reading, you start taking notes, and you come to it. Perhaps you've read the whole thing already, and then you read it again. That might actually be the best thing. You enroll now, like literally right now. You get the copy of Richard Latimore's translation. You start reading. Maybe you've read most of it by the time we begin, which is in 4 weeks. And that will allow you to read then with even more focus and more guidance the text again. And that will help you to memorize so much of it. This is the best way to read, is really to read something several times and read it, almost like perusing it, going through it. Some superficial reading is fine, but then read it again with more focus, because you will want to focus in a group that is focused. You will want to focus because, as our students have said, this is everything university should have been, but wasn't. Why? Because, well, it's not, scruffy, dusty, scholarly stuff. We want to understand what's going on. Okay, I have to. I don't know if anyone saw my recent live stream on Dr. Peterson's attempt at reading Nietzsche. The Odyssey is a perfect example to go against Jordan Peterson's always tell the truth rule. I do wonder myself, though, whether Jordan Peterson has held to that rule himself. So I would like to point out that in a yeah, okay, well, you know better than I, Harris, that this is where we get the word from. Isn't it interesting that Telemachus's mentor was mentor? If you ever wondered why we speak of mentorship or mentors and proteges of mentors, then you should read and find out that Telemachus's teacher, his guide, etc., was named mentor. So that's where we get the word from. So many things that perhaps we just say, like there's a siren song of blah blah blah. Clearly, of course, obviously from the Odyssey. Just for that reason, it will be interesting to read this text. So again, you find everything on this website. I just would like to invite you, if you're listening to this right now, just go on this website now and just take a look. You find all the details of when everything takes place, when we're going to read what, which translation we'll use, what the main focus points are, etc. And then you can join the Odyssey here. This is the auditor tier, the Ithacan auditor. You can be a good guest, yeah, not a bad guest. You can be a good suitor. And respect Xenia and listen in on your own just here. If you don't have time, I always say if you don't have time for at least 2 out of the 5 seminars, then take this. If you have time for at least 2.5 of the seminars, take the Halkyon Salon Scholar. And you'll join a live seminar. And I say this again, this is not my words, this is what people have said to us. This is what university should have been like, but it wasn't. We repeatedly get this. And people return. So this is, I'm not, if you're new here, I didn't just start this a week ago. I started Halkyon in February of 2020. And my first course was on Otium cum dignitate, leisure with dignity, leisure as the basis, again, of Europe, of European culture. On Plato, Aristotle, Cicero, Bertrand Russell, interestingly, Nietzsche, Humboldt, and Joseph Pieper, of course. Comes highly recommended if you read Joseph Pieper. Alongside this course, by the way, I'm going to read, and I'd like to invite you to do the same. I'm going to read Werner Jaeger's Paideia. There's an excellent English. At this point, unfortunately, it's easier to get an English translation of this work, new, than it is to get the original German, which is out of print and prohibitively expensive. I was lucky to get a copy at least of volume 1 before, for some reason, prices just shot up to the absolutely absurd levels of such a text. So it's out, as far as I know, I might be wrong, but as far as I know, this is out of print in German. In English, it's available. The English translation is very good. So I'd like to invite you to read Werner Jaeger alongside this course, if you so desire. I will certainly make reference to him and will let you know when I do so. All right. So what happens during the seminars? This is a Zoom meeting. You'll be, the usual thing. There's a gallery view. I lecture for about, depends on the week. Sometimes I might go for just half an hour, and then we have a group discussion for the remainder. Or sometimes I might just split it up and speak on one topic in the first hour for about 15, 20 minutes, and the same again in the second hour. There will be short breakout sessions just to give you a chance to meet everyone and talk to people in a small group as well. These are off the record. And then, my guess is that we'll probably go for about 2.5 hours every week. And if you can continue the discussion during the week on Discord, and you can, if you have the time, I think you can use Discord to have audio chats as well. And people usually end up doing some sort of reading groups and other things, either alongside or after the session, after the seminar ends. So this is the seminar tier, and if you'd like to take additional private tutorials, then you may apply either for the Odysseus Fellowship. There are now, how many are there? 3 seats. There's 2 left of this. And then there's the Sovereign Scholar. There's strictly only one to protect my time. So, I mean, this is for someone of you who's perhaps working on something or looking for guidance in leadership and navigating a chaotic world. And I built Halkyon specifically 6 years ago, if you look at our website, because the Halkyon bird, the mythic kingfisher, breeds in a time of stillness when the sea is still. However, it's actually a time of darkness and chaos. It's winter. So just around winter solstice, that's when the Halkyon bird breeds, gives new life before tempest and death return, which they are always want to do. But the Halkyon bird, of course, knows that they have also already been overcome. So just take a look at this. You have to apply because I want to know who you are before, and it takes less than 2 minutes actually. I just want to hear a few words on who you are and why you think that you'd like to take private tutorials with me based off of Homer's The Odyssey, but which will apply then to your navigating perhaps your current situation in life, in business, in leadership, etc. And yes, here's your teacher. The A, by the way, one of my middle names is Achilles, or Achill, as we say in German. So that is what the A stands for. Johannes Achill is the German version. It's Achilles in English. Closer to the Greek. The bloody English are again closer to the Greek. The video game, my friend, is Deus Ex, if you're listening back to this now. And okay, so this, I think, sort of summarizes everything. I'm still waiting for your questions. Don't be shy. There's a lot of people now listening to this stream, so I'm really eager to take at least one question. In the meantime, should I just read the FAQs? So what if you miss a live session because you travel or because there's work? By the way, it's perfectly fine to join in from your car or on a train if you have a connection. You can also just join in as a listener if the the signal isn't strong enough. That's fine, perfectly fine. So don't think that you have to be fully present every single week. If it's been a rough week or something, just come and listen. Yeah, turn off your camera, fine. If you really can't make it, every session is recorded and you get indefinite or lifetime access to all the recordings. And that means there's no subscription and you can always come back to those recordings. The course will close for enrollment completely in July. And once it's done, it's your cohort. You come back to it in a year from now, listen back to some of the lectures, maybe take a look again at the syllabus. Maybe I should show you the syllabus as well. 1 second. So when you enroll, so I mentioned here, this is a painting of Homer, the blind poet with his guide. This is a link to Amazon just to make sure you don't have to use that link. It's not an affiliate link or anything. I mentioned briefly the student presentations, and here's the syllabus which you can download, which sort of there's a brief invitation letter here from me, a summary of what we're going to discuss every week. It might change perhaps a little bit, and for some reason week 4 is in here twice. I'll make sure that this gets corrected. And yeah, just to give you a bit of a map, as it were, a map through the course, so that you don't get lost. We'll be using, so one question that we got also via email is which translation we'll use. We will use Richmond Latimore's, as I've said before. I think it is the most elegant, eloquent in modern English that I'm aware of. I find it easier to read than Fagel's, even though Fagel's is of course wonderful. Yes, it is great. It is a great painting. Thank you very much, Mr. I suppose pessimistic idealist, for becoming a member. Very generous of you. and for listening and leaving good comments here. I won't, if you forgive me, I won't address Schopenhauer just now. The time for that is, as I said, end of next year. 2027 sounds like a good year for Schopenhauer for some reason. I don't know why. Feels like we're getting closer to the end, doesn't it? Do I need a background in classical philosophy or ancient Greek to join? No. So while I will reference some of the ancient Greek words, this is not. We're not trying to translate the text. We're not going to belabor different problems of translation, etc. It's not a philology course. It's all we have the translation we've said, which is Richard Latimor's, which is splendid, and it'll speak to us. And I will sometimes reference some of the Greek where I think this is something that we should look out for. As for example, I said before, polytropos is important, of course. Polymetes is important. Eidolon is important. This reference to Eidolon as to the phantom, that which is visible but isn't touchable, which is so striking that we think of the Platonic forms as invisible, which of course Plato has. The middle Plato, we could say, also describes them as such, only to realize that what sort of issues he runs into with that. The more mature Plato will see that an eidos that is invisible could also be an eidolon. So, but you will go away from this course and be able to reference some of the ancient Greek. Yes. Ideally, you could even try and learn some basic reading capacities. You could even just read a few words. Reading is easy. Translating is difficult. It's Homeric Greek. There's a reason why you begin with Attic Greek. But we should. So no need to have any background. What you should bring is a joy for reading and learning and sincere interest, and just good spirits to be a good sport in the group. So, but you will walk away with some really good knowledge of Greek concepts and Greek terminology. So it's beyond just reading a translation. We will look at the Greek where it makes sense, and you will be able to relate why or what rather, how, let's just say, how to understand polytropos. Okay, what is the next question? How much time do I need to allocate for reading each week? So depends how fast you read. If you read the whole 70, 75 pages per week on average, 3 hours maybe, maybe 4, depending. And there will be more focused readings, of course, as well. So you could spend less time per week if you just focus on some of the sections of book 1, some of the sections of book 2. Then maybe it's an hour. But ideally, what you do is you enroll now, and once you have enrolled, you start reading. So once you get to the course, you basically read the text again. That's the ideal situation. I know people don't have that much time, perhaps. Perfectly fine to start reading when we read the text, but it gives you enough time. You start reading, and the sessions are on Saturdays. So you could, carve out some hours on a Sunday evening, maybe to start reading again. You do that every morning, perhaps during the week or in the evening, instead of, I don't know, watching Netflix or something. So if you have questions specifically on this course, then I'm happy to answer it. Um, and then in between the sessions, there's the Discord where usually the discussion continues. That's a space really for you. So I will be there and answer some questions sometimes, or just be present. But overall, the Discord server is a space for you. But throughout this time, you'll be able to, as much as you want, you'll be able to be in touch with the others. So as I said before, if you want to do a reading group on the Sunday, just to continue your own reading of this text with a few others, just talk to them and ask them, etc. So let me just summarize perhaps again, as there are no questions coming in that specifically pertain to this course, that enrollment is now open and that half the seats have been taken for the live cohort. And the entire course curriculum, everything you'd like to know, when does it begin? July 11th. What time? 4 to 6 p.m. Live from Italy, mornings in the US at an Eastern Standard Time, and 7 to 10 a.m. in California, for example. Then you find all of this here. You find my invitation here as well. Summary of what we're going to do, course curriculum and schedule, when we're going to read what. And if you don't have time for at least 2 sessions, my friends, then you do take the Ithacan Auditor tier. If you do have time for at least 2, and again, all sessions are recorded, then you take this tier, please. The Halkyon Salon Scholar. About half left, 20 seats available only. And if you'd like to take private tutorials with me, also over Zoom, then please do apply either for the Odysseus Fellowship for 3 private sessions, or the Sovereign Scholarship, 5 sessions. So it takes about a minute to fill this in, because I'd like to know who you are and what particularly draws you to the Odyssey, and why you think that in your decision making, in your life, and navigating a chaotic world, Homer's The Odyssey is a great guide, which it is, and a good remedy, a good means also, perhaps almost, to forge your character. All right. So, thank you very much again for listening. Thank you, friends of the European spirit. I look forward to meeting you all in the spirit of Xenia, of hospitality, in 4 weeks for the first live session on July the 11th, a Saturday, at 4 p.m., 10 a.m. if you're in the in Eastern Standard Time. So find out when that is in your time zone. And in the meantime, if you're watching this later on, leave a comment if you have any questions, and I will gladly respond to it if I can. I may, I suppose, but I'm not sure if I can. Okay. So again, head over to the enrollment page now and do join the course before it's too late, because every year we get someone who then complains that they didn't hear it or didn't know it. This time, this will be taught once, and enrollment will close July the 8th, and that's it for all tiers. So again, look forward to meeting you at the course. If you want to take private tutorials, just do a quick application for the scholarships. And yeah, thank you.